call on somebody in the audience, because we've got one of the world's great climate scientists and climate communicators in the audience, who doesn't drop the science and run away. Steve Schneider's just published a book called Science as a Contact Sport. So I thought Steve might want to comment on science communication, and I think he probably does call himself a climate scientist. So he was my PhD advisor, that's why I'm quite happy. 25 years later.
Thank you, Diana, because I was going to have to call this advisor gate and doing that. Just a couple of things. Yes, there are climate scientists. The point is that climate science is so broad that there are physical components and biological components and social components and value components and other things. Chemical. And none of us, of course, chemical is the same. And none of us, and economics, none of us can do all of that at once. It's a very interdisciplinary field, but we can learn enough to be integrated, be part of teams, and at some stage you cross some threshold that you would define as climate science. And I think that we could agree with that. But more importantly, with regard to people getting involved out there in the process, having done it for 39 years now, which is why I wrote Science as Contact Sport, it's basically a story of failure. It's been our incapacity to sell it, but I think that we're a little bit too harsh on ourselves. The area where we deserve to be harsh on ourselves is that we are really toilet trained to bury our leads. You lead with your caveats. This is not going to work because you're fighting against forces that are protecting the market share or their ideology, who primarily are interested in protecting client interests, and they're not even interested, for the most part, in the truth. So as a result, what we do is we hamstring ourselves at the outset by following those kinds of, well, if we're not sure, we shouldn't say anything. And I will even give you an example from your own presentations. The picture of the sea level rise of only half a meter was labeled IPCC. That's not true. It's IPCC Working Group 1. In Working Group 2, in Chapter 19, which I happen to be the coordinating lead author of, we said 4 to 6 meters of sea level rise in centuries to millennia with a, quote, medium confidence, meaning 1/3 to 2/3. So what was the difference? We had no difference with Working Group 1 over the science. It's that they are what economists would call type 1 error averse. They're afraid of the false positive. Until we have very high confidence, we shouldn't say anything. That is policy prescriptive. And actually, illegal in the IPCC. It came from weak epistemology, not from bad science. Whereas in Working Group 2, we are driven by governments telling us risk management. Remember, the role of science is risk. What can happen multiplied times the odds. What to do about it is risk management. That's value judgment. And therefore, we were driven by type 2 error aversion, which means fear of the false negative. Let's not let society, because of, it isn't entirely a high confidence statement yet, what the sea level rise is, so we won't say anything about it. In fact, in Working Group 1, and I'll finish short, certainly in Working Group 1, what happened is they agreed that Greenland was melting much faster than anybody's models, and therefore they concluded, therefore we have no really good scientific basis for making a projection. In Working Group 2, we said it's melting faster than the models, and 125,000 years ago, it was a degree warmer, we had 4 to 6 meters. My God, you got to warn society about this. And that's why we gave it medium confidence. So that was a difference, again, in the philosophical perspective, and it all got resolved because inside the IPCC we do talk to each other in the synthesis as risk of meters of sea level rise in century. So that is part of the problem where we scientists hurt our own communication. But you've forgotten something. There are wires and spin doctors out there. They are very well paid, and they count on the media balance that you mentioned, because the pinnacle of media reporting is political reporting, where it's legitimate to get the Democrat, get the Republican, get the Tory, get Labor. But when you apply that model to a complex issue with multiple outcomes where we winnow out the relative probability, you dumb it down to end of the world and good for you, the two lowest probability extremes. No wonder everybody's confused. Then you come along and you hack in and steal private communications, and then redact them, that is, put them out in selected form, and then you claim that words like trick mean that we're trying to fool people. Well, in science and in math, as everybody knows, the jargon trick means the problem's too hard to solve straight up, so we've got a clever simplification. We don't use that word. It doesn't mean deception. It means, hey, I'm pretty proud that I figured a way around something you couldn't do. And so when you do that, democratization in science becomes almost an absurdity, because almost nobody out there understands that jargon. And therefore they misinterpret it. And then the liars and spin doctors come along, and they call it climate gate, when in fact it's climate denier gate. Calling it climate gate would be like saying that the break-in artists in the Watergate should have been venerated as heroes had they uncovered a memo, and the Democrats should have been vilified. We've got it exactly backwards. And the media here has been just dangerously complicit. And the fact that people could say, a few scientists, you want something? Oh, no. Oh, okay.
We want to hear you.
I'm almost done. And to sit there and say, as I'm sorry to say, the chief negotiator for the Saudis said in the G77 yesterday, that, oh, well, because the hockey stick, right, that's the 1,000-year record. Blade at the end, it goes up above the 1,000-year record, is debatable. It's true, it is debatable. It's always been debatable. Therefore, what he said in the G77, I heard it from several people, we should be canceling this meeting because there's no longer a basis for anthropogenic global warming. That is beyond bad understanding of science. That's a fraud. And the reason for that is, you've heard it all over America, especially from contrarian Congress members, is that anthropogenic global warming in the IPCC was never based upon the hockey stick. It's based upon what we call fingerprint methods, statistical ways of comparing models driven by natural or anthropogenic forces, in which is a higher correlation with what was observed in the last 100 years. So we've got a false frame, we've democratized science, we've given equal status to the bargaining table to liars and spin doctors, and that's what they are. And now we have a public that's dropping its belief in climate change. This really reminds me of the new Weimar Republic. I'm very